Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. I'm Julie Podewitz, and today I welcome Garry Hennis to the show. Garry is responsible for all aspects of daily operations of the Westminster communities of Florida. He has over 25 years experience serving in various leadership capacities for not-for-profit, mission-driven organizations. Mr. Hennis is a licensed nursing home administrator, holds a bachelor's degree in health planning administration, and has continued his studies with graduate work in health services administration. He joined the organization as Chief Operating Officer in October of 2011. Welcome, Garry.
It's good to see you, Julie. It's wonderful to be here as part of your podcast.
It's great to hear you and see you. And Garry, October of 2011, and I've known you ever since you joined the organization. As a matter of fact, I remember the day that we met. I was doing a training for your teams, and I had on two different shoes. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do. I thought it was just unique.
Yeah. So I was, thought, oh, everything's going great. And do you have any questions? And right away, several hands up. And I'm like, oh, wow, And one of the women said, do you know you have two different shoes on? And I looked down, I'm like, okay, so this is a woman who's running at slightly too fast a pace. Oh my gosh, a lot's gone on since 2011. So Garry, tell us a little bit about your background. Specific as your Chief Operating Officer, right? But I've always known you to be a sales leader. So maybe you could just shed some light on your background and really how it relates to sales as an operator.
Sure. Well, I started in the field actually back in 1985. So I've been in the field quite long, right out of undergraduate work. So, and I started in affordable housing, eventually got in to be a nursing home administrator, and eventually worked my way up. And along those career changes, you soon become keenly aware of the importance of sales and your sales team. And that's always stayed with me, because in order to be successful, it comes back, a lot of it comes back to your sales and occupancy, right? So that's always been something that I needed to learn more about and be keenly aware. And when you and I met about 11 years ago, entering into Westminster communities of Florida, quickly realized that our structure and process in the sales teams was not consistent. We had communities that were very successful and others that were struggling at the time. And thankfully, I got to meet you and a few others from your team and help us really evaluate how best to structure and create processes that would make us more successful.
And Westminster, of course, I've been a fan for many years, and you've had tremendous success in Florida. Can you kind of, even through COVID, right, and great growth, can you share, the journey there and really what you attribute to this success?
Sure. I think it's fair to say over the 11 years, Westminster has grown quite substantially through the acquisition of communities or communities that have decided to affiliate with us because of our expertise. Our last community, one of our last CCRCs or life plan communities that joined us, was coming out of double bankruptcy and was having significant challenges with occupancy. So going into the pandemic, it's fair to say that we were sitting pretty for an organization. All of our life plan communities were at 95% or greater. Our affordable housing communities were always at 98, 99%. And so that first year, because we were pretty aggressive at securing the future of our residents and pivoting where we needed to, we were able to maintain our occupancy through that first year pretty strongly. It's fair to say, though, 2021 and going into 22 here, we've seen impacts to our occupancy, but we still remain strong. We've always compare ourselves to the NIC data, so that as a true benchmarking for ourselves, just to make sure that we're grounded. And we're sitting at 90% as an organization. And so you can see where the impact has been for those 2 years. But it's fair to say that we celebrate our growth and our occupancies every time that we can. So we have communities at 98%, and then we still have others that have been more profoundly impacted that we're working with the teams to rebound, to get us back to where we were.
And can you tell us a little bit, those that aren't familiar with Westminster, your portfolio of
Sure.
offering?
Sure, we have 10 life plan communities of various sizes. Our largest is just under 700 independent living units, assisted living, and skilled nursing with some memory care.
Okay. Well, it's tremendous. And, you
Sure.
mentioned, sales systems, sales processes, and consistency. I'm curious, Garry, from your experience, what, when you see your communities at 98%, 95%, 90% portfolio, which is incredible, 2 years into COVID, it's an incredible period, but 2 years into COVID, what do you think makes a leader, and let's specifically sales leader, successful in this business, especially now?
Understanding what it takes as far as build the ability to build relationships and maintain that relationship, whether in person, over Zoom, or just building that relationship over time from the initial contact to the point that the prospective resident moves into our community. I think that's one of the keys. The other piece is self-accountability, to meeting the metrics that are established, whether or not that's time on the phone, time converting to tours, or converting to eventually the individual to become a resident. I think those are keys. For the organization as a whole, to make sure that we have enough support for our sales teams, and that each of our executive directors are integrated into that sales process, and that they are actually considered part of the sales leadership, support each of the sales directors. So I think we have that pretty well down, over the years. And a lot of that, I'll give you props for, all your support and assisting the organization to get it right back when we had our challenges back in 2011, coming out of the downturn in Florida.
Feels like a long time ago in a way, and the time is flying. But you mentioned, well, 2011, we were still, especially our business, recovering from the Great Recession. But Garry, a lot of organizations, and maybe not enough, but quite a few, do sales training, which is great. It's so critically important. But it's that consistency over time, and it's that accountability, and it's just like starting anything. That's fun and new and woo woo. We get all kind of pumped up, and then we have to go back to real life, which can be draining. You talked about sales directors being able to make connections and carry relationships forward and do the work and do the follow-up. And it can and face so many challenges. And without strong leadership, right, and accountability and consistency and coaching and focus, it's going to go down, right? And I think one thing about Westminster that I know to be true is that it wasn't back in 2011 you did training and then never looked at it again. So how do you structure your re-emphasis on sales and occupancy?
Well, one of the things that you helped me way back when coming into this role was it was all about back to basics. And when I say back to basics, it's those measurables that we have to focus on in addition to structure. So when I talked about that initially back in 2011, we had one region of our organization that was successful. The other region had a very different structure, and it was set up more as a decentralized sales process, and clearly was not working. So through our planning process and relooking at that, we went back and had a consistent structure at every single one of our life planning communities, which included the sales director, sales counselors, any additional administrative support, move-in coordinator, et cetera, so that we were consistent at every community. And then we worked on educating each of the executive directors and assistant executive directors to understand that they were part of the process for that sales team, and to recognize in every small win that was possible, and whether or not it was metrics that we were looking at or actual sales coming in, and celebrating where we had those successes, or also recognizing when we were not moving things forward, and to truly evaluate the process. It wasn't always about the individual. Sometimes it was about the consistency in the process. So.
Well, you mentioned back to basics. I'm taking notes, Gary. Back to basics, consistency, and evaluating the process, right? And if you don't have a process or the benchmarks or that consistency, you have nothing to measure against. And then I like when you said not necessarily evaluating the person, but the process. They're like figuring out which problem you need to solve, right?
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes it is the individual, and sometimes the individual is motivated differently, and it's about understanding and having those discussions, whether or not we're helping to prop an individual up or coach them to help them do better, or help them realize that maybe the sales director role might not be the best fit for them. They might do actually better in the sales counselor role.
Sure.
Or in some cases, maybe they have a stronger desire to do something else and didn't realize it. And through that process, you help those individuals come to that discovery.
So two things I wanted to kind of follow up. The first is operators. So you talked about your administrators, your executive directors really leading sales, just like you as chief operating officer lead. I know you have a phenomenal vice president of sales who I admire a lot, but you ultimately, right, you lead the direction, and at the community level, the executive director does. What advice would you give someone listening to this who may just be starting down this path or is having challenges with executive leadership, buying into being sales focused?
I think if I go back to my years as an executive director, one of the things that I realized pretty quickly is that I needed to learn how the sales process worked. so that if I had that understanding, it's difficult to enforce something or work with individuals to have a complete understanding if I didn't understand each of the roles in the process, and that makes a successful sales outcome. So in learning that myself, and putting myself into that role, I was able to support those sales directors. There's always a budget that gets created, and out of that budget, there's a number of sales that must be achieved through the year, and hopefully you're exceeding those levels that you anticipate. But sometimes, depending on the market, that becomes much more difficult, especially when there's new competition coming in. But it's all about owning your market. I think part of it's about owning your market, understanding who your competitors are, even people or products that are in your market that you might not understand. I think it's critically important for the sales director and the executive director to do tours to understand who your competitors are, so that you're establishing realistic expectations of your team. It's one thing to have stretch goals. It's another thing to have realistic goals, so that you can have both. And I think so that you have the ability to reach a target and then exceed a target.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in that process, so if you understand your market, your competitors in your market, it's better. You have a holistic view. And in senior living, there are, while we are life plan communities, we have a modified agreement. There's the type A contracts, and then there's the rental contracts, or just plain type Cs. But there's also just, especially in Florida, compared to Pennsylvania, where I spent the majority of my career, there's a lot more for-profit providers providing different services here in Florida. So understanding that market and what each of those bring to the table as far as options for your prospective residents really helps you identify and understand the market you're going for. And then it's about owning that market and working with your sales teams so that there's a complete understanding and know how to sell against those products. That understanding has to be with the executive director and your sales director. It's paramount to understand that, so that you know the differences that are there, so that you can really sell the benefits of your particular campus against the others. I don't know if I answered that question totally.
No. So selling senior living is challenging. Selling period is challenging. But life plan, takes it up a notch, right? Because this is even a bigger financial commitment, right, upfront. So that sales, in my experience, Garry, someone who really spends the time to master sales and senior living is like a master's degree in sales, because this is such a high level sale, as I call it, and selling life plan is the PhD. You guys have a very strong sales team in an industry with very high turnover. You manage to maintain, I don't know your exact statistics, but I'm going to guess it's a lower than average sales director turnover. So I would jump to the assumption that there's a high level of loyalty and a high level of satisfaction in as far as job satisfaction. I believe the last statistic, Garry, was something like 75% of sales director turnover in our business, even higher, maybe during COVID. So my question or comment kind of segues into the next topic, which is your culture, your company culture. And can you kind of speak maybe to both your retention, that satisfaction, kind of what advice or what y'all do, and tell us a little bit about Westminster's culture, what it's like to work for you all?
Sure. Well, first, let me say that from a retention perspective for our sales directors and leaders, we're probably about 80% retention rate for those sales directors. The majority of our sales directors are still in place that have been here way back when you and
I'm sorry for interrupting. That's amazing. When I say 80%, I'm talking about turnover. You have approximately a 20% turnover?
I would say, yeah, I think that's roughly about where we're at with sales directors. I mean, we do have a lot of loyalty from that perspective. And part of that is, I think, the ongoing culture and the recognition and support that is given to those individuals. And we work together to solve challenges. And through our, like you said, our vice president of sales and marketing, she is amazing. You know, I worked really hard to convince her to join us a long time ago. And she helped pick up from what you and I were doing and really take us across the finish line. And she has really built a team and a stronger process. And the culture itself, I mean, we are on a culture journey currently. 2 years ago, we got a new CEO, Terry Rogers, joined our organization, and he's helped identify that there's opportunities within our culture. So we're on a broad-based culture journey within the organization to really just refocus and even make it more robust and richer. We've always had a good culture here, but there's always in any QAPI or CQI process opportunities where we continue to do better. From recruitment and retention as an organization, we're very typical as far as in the healthcare area, but in other areas we are stronger with the ancillary areas. So I'll just say that. COVID has made it difficult, no different than the acute care areas. And people getting the opportunity to evaluate their lives and what they really want. So, you know, we're all pivoting and adapting as we get through that. And hopefully we'll see individuals come back into the workforce to help us continue to get stronger as far as that goes.
Yes, absolutely. One thing I'm hearing you say is that continual quest for improvement, you know, that excellence is always your goal, and then stretching and learning and you know, what way can we improve? What ways, okay, now this is life now, or this is you got to pivot, improve, stretch, all while maintaining excellence. And certainly not for just your employees, just your residents, of course. And so just really know we're running out of time, but some of the things that you all do for your residents, like the continuing education, the collaboration, kind of partnerships from a local level, Garry, that Westminster Communities of Florida is done and continues to do, even like with local colleges or universities, in other volunteer organizations in your local communities. Can you kind of share a couple of examples of why a resident chooses to live in one of your communities?
Sure. One of our core foundations is about lifelong learning in our broader wellness program, so that ensuring that residents have an opportunity to continue their purpose and have a purpose-driven life. Part of that is about lifelong learning in our relationships with the 10 universities that we have some form of affiliation or just a relationship with, to support that lifelong learning, where there's classes that are given on our campuses prior to the pandemic, I think it's fair to say. But hopefully we'll get back to that soon, where we actually have space on many of our campuses where those individuals come in to teach classes of whatever the residents want to learn about. I think one of the key components for us has always been, since I've been here, like no other organization I've ever worked at, where our residents have voice. Whether or not that comes across as there's 35 different resident-driven committees on a campus. If there's anything a resident wants to do, you can generally find that there's a committee of individuals working on that to bring some fulfillment into their life, or through our large and expanding fitness centers to help individuals stay spry and continue to have that work with their mind, body, and spirit. So our focus is on the wellness, the wholeness of an individual within our organization. In our resident councils, we work closely. While we always work closely with our resident councils, I think the pandemic forced us to even work closer. We would have weekly meetings through Zoom with all of our resident council chairs, just that touch base of where we're at with each community, to give feedback from the organization's leadership, but also to hear from each of the resident council chairs what their challenges were. And we work together through each week, quite frankly. We are currently, so through those couple years, we are now at where we still have monthly Zooms. While COVID is waning in this Omicron period, when we hope that it will continue to wane, that we still have those monthly Zooms with our resident council chairs to just give feedback, and so that we can continually work together for the life of the community.
It sounds, as I'm listening to you, I'm visualizing a full circle. You start with sales directors, executive directors, community leaders who connect with prospects, build a relationship, as you said. They feel seen and heard, and make that emotional connection, however short or long the decision cycle is for that individual, right? Could be a couple of years and even longer sometimes with a life plan community. And then as your team members, your employees feel seen and heard, your retention, especially in the sales realm, is incredible. And then your residents feel seen and heard as well. Their voices matter. And that's powerful, because isn't that at the end of the day, kind of fulfilling what it is that we all want to do and feel, that we're striving to do, and that we all need to have a voice, and more importantly, feel seen and heard.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And, I am not pretending to say that we're perfect, and we continue to continually improve in that area. So, but, at the end of the day, it's about our residents and ensuring that they have what they want, and, and helping them obtain what they want at their campus. So,
Garry, thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning. I really, really appreciate you spending time, like I said, sharing your expertise. It's great to see you, and I hope that you continue, I know you will continue personally, professionally, being very, very successful. And I'm going to continue being your biggest fan.
Well, I'll need to publicly say I still very much am very grateful to you, Julie, and for those early days here at Westminster, helping us get off on the right foot, and just always being there and available should there be a challenge. And I thank you for coming to support our teams, and look forward to seeing you in the training this coming May. So
I'm so excited about that. So I get to go to Florida. I'll come to Florida anytime, Garry. You just call me.
Okay, sounds great. Good to see you.